So how do we imagine an AI Commons? Bart, Simon, and myself are here today to introduce you to a little bit about what does the AI Commons mean, what's this link between artificial intelligence and the idea of the commons. And in this video, we're going to walk you through some of the participants in our Imagining AI Commons workshop to help you introduce and understand how they think about the commons.
So in fact, the AI Commons is not a new idea. People have been thinking about it for quite a long time, but our approach is slightly different. We wanted to approach this from thinking about the commons rather than AI. So we've gathered a group of experts to talk and think about the commons, the different meanings of that term, because not everybody means the exact same thing. And by thinking more carefully about the commons, we'll understand a bit more, we hope, about the implications and the public dimensions of AI.
In the first part of our presentation, what we want to hear is about how artificial intelligence depends upon, requires certain commonness, common resources. And so the first way that we can think about the commons is in this nature of what is common and how that commonness enables artificial intelligence.
When we are talking about AI and the commons, actually what is more common right now, more normal right now, is that we are the commons, the data producers or the sources of data that all the different AI programs are using. We aren't the ones who are using it. The AI programs are the agents using us as their sources of data. We are the commons in the sense of the data sources that they're all free to use. So that puts us in a very different position if we're trying to negotiate with AI.
So I'm not really thinking of it in terms of policy, but trying to think through it as like some of the ways that people have like actually pushed back and some of the forms of protest and how could that be like appropriated within AI. So in the feminist commons work that I was reading, there's like thinking about forms of protest and forms of disruption that have been used by people, like I guess that's informed by a commons perspective, like people feeling that they have a right to their land or a right to, I guess, like common goods and common resources. So that inspired me to think through, I guess, like forms of protest that content creators could engender. So for example, like if you're measuring the use of like profanity, like, you know, what would it mean if all of the influencers in the data set just like constantly were swearing the whole time? Like, how would that disrupt the model?
On the one hand, as governance techniques take up AI, that is, in my view, probably frightening, or has the likelihood of being frightening in terms of its consequences. But on the other hand, these movements, when a major corporation says, no, everyone should have access to genetic information, it's part of that reshuffling of power.
The commons, if it is something that we hold in commons, how do we manage it? How do we take care of it? Well, there's a great school in economic theory and institutional theory about common pool resource management. And these theories of common pool resource management really can help us think meaningfully of what it means to take something that's shared and manage it responsibly.
The definition that we developed is resource spaces under regimes. Resources always exist in certain kinds of spaces that have to be taken into consideration in developing the commons. And the regime is the whole system of governance. So the commons is this combination of the resource, its particular spatialities, and the governance system. And those governance systems can be anything from simple to very, very complex.
Commons, at least as we would refer to it, as Ostrom and many others sort of talk about the commons. Commons is community-based, and so it's not complete open access. It tends to be governance by members of a community, and sort of non-members may get more or less access. They may, be treated differently under the governance system than members.
What I found really helpful about Silvia Federici's definition of feminist commons, because I think there probably are multiple definitions that, I do a disservice by saying this speaks to all of them, but basically acknowledging that a lot of women's work is very privatized and individualized. So thinking about, for example, working within the home, domestic work, in terms of my work, looking at female influencers, often work alone, there's not very much potential for commons.
The last thing we want to emphasize is that the AI Commons is something meaningful and that we want to take care of. And there are clear risks, there's concerns, there's problems, there's things at stake with this AI Commons. And so the term, this concept, isn't something that's just conceptual. It's very much about how the future of this technology will develop. And hopefully the Commons can help that develop in a more just and sustainable way.
There are separate elements. There's the software, there's the training data, there's the data that's being sensed, there are the predictions that are made, and there's the agency, what happens as a consequence of the predictions. And each one of those needs to be separately analyzed from a Commons perspective, what the possibilities and the limits are. Typically, when we refer to artificial intelligence, all those 5 different elements are lumped into one, AI and the Commons, as if there's one thing. I'm saying it isn't just one thing. It's made up of different things, and the Commons problem is different for each of those elements. We can commonly have access to software, but not necessarily have the same access to the training data or to different sensed data. And we certainly have no access to predictions that are made by proprietary software or to the acts of agency that are based on that.
And then there's another set of resources that are involved with AI, the computational resources like the actual computers, the servers, the networks, but there are things that are congestible, right, that have finite capacity. It's shareable. It might be governed and managed as a commons, but your ability to share those resources is different, it's constrained, and it might very well give rise to different issues from a commons governance perspective than the management and governance of the data or the training data, the sensing data.
You have to create this commons, and that's always a sort of economic, political, historical, social problem. And the question, really important, is who is going to get a seat at the table in deciding what kind of commons is actually created.
So thank you so much for paying attention and listening to our discussion of the AI Commons. Hopefully the term becomes a bit more clear to you. If you're interested in learning more, I really recommend for you to read a report where we outline this concept, and follow us at Machine Agencies, at the Milieux Institute, where this is the type of research we're doing every day.